Hey guys, welcome back or welcome to my channel. It has been a long time since I've sat down in front of a camera. If I look different, got my braces off, and it's just been like over a month since I've done this, so I am just looking a bit different. In today's video we're going to be looking at like the top creepiest creepypasta stories, myths, legends that I could find. I love these kinds of things. I love that they're most likely not true, so I can scare myself and still feel safe. So the first one we're going to look at today is the smiling man. I don't know if you've ever heard of this before, but we're going to hop right into where this story comes from. About 5 years ago, I lived downtown in a major city in the US. I've always been a night person, so I would often find myself bored after my roommate, who was decidedly not a night person, went to sleep. To pass the time, I used to go for long walks and spend a lot of time thinking. I spent 4 years like that, walking alone at night, and never once had I had a reason to feel afraid. I always used to joke to my roommate that even drug dealers in this city were polite. But all of that changed in just a few minutes in one evening. It was a Wednesday, somewhere between 1 and 2 in the morning, and I was walking near a police patrolled park, quite a ways from my apartment. It was a quiet night, even for a weeknight, with very little traffic and almost no one on foot. The park, as it was most nights, was completely empty. I turned down a short side street in order to loop back to my apartment when I first noticed him. At the far end of the street, on my side, was a silhouette of a man, dancing. It was a strange dance, similar to a waltz, but he finished each box with an odd forward stride. I guess you could say he was dance walking, headed straight for me. I decided he was probably drunk. I stepped as close as I could to the road to give him the majority of the sidewalk to pass me by. The closer he got, the more I realised how gracefully he was moving. He was very tall and lanky and wearing an old suit. He danced closer still until I could make out his face. His eyes were open and wide and wild. His head tilted back slightly, looking up at the sky. His mouth was formed in a painfully wide cartoon of a smile. Between the eyes and the smile, I decided to cross the street before he danced any closer. I took my eyes off of him to cross the street. As soon as I got to the other side, I glanced back, and I stopped dead in my tracks. He'd stopped dancing and he was standing with one foot in the street, perfectly parallel to me. He was facing me but still looking skyward, smile still wide on his lips. I was completely and utterly unnerved by this. I started walking again, but kept my eyes on the man. He didn't move. Once I had put about half a block between us, I turned away from him for a moment to watch the sidewalk in front of me. The street and the sidewalk ahead of me were completely empty. Still unnerved, I looked back to where he had been standing to find him gone. For the briefest of moments I felt relieved, until I noticed him. He had crossed the street, and was now slightly crouched down. I couldn't tell for sure due to the distance of the shadows, but I was certain he was facing me. I looked away from him for no more than 10 seconds, so it was clear that he had moved fast. I was so shocked that I stood there for some time, staring at him, and then he started moving towards me again. He took giant, exaggerated tiptoe steps, as if he were a cartoon character sneaking up on someone, except he was moving very, very quickly. I'd like to say at this point I ran away or pulled out my pepper spray or my cell phone or anything at all, but I didn't. I just stood there, completely frozen, as the smiling man crept towards me. And then he stopped again, about a car length away from me, still smiling his smile, still looking at the sky. When I finally found my voice, I blurted out the first thing that came to mind. What I meant to ask was, "What do you want?" in an angry, commanding tone, but what came out was a whimper. What? Regardless of whether or not humans can smell fear, they certainly can hear it. I heard it in my own voice, and that only made me more afraid. But he didn't react at all. He just stood there, smiling. And then, after what felt like forever, he turned around, very slowly, and started dance walking away. Just like that. Not wanting to turn my back to him again, I just watched him go, until he was far enough away that he was almost out of sight. And then I realised something. He wasn't moving away anymore, nor was he dancing. I watched in horror as the distant shape of him grew larger and larger. He was coming my way, and this time he was running. I ran too. I ran until I was off of the side road and back onto a better lit road with sparse traffic. Looking behind me then, he was nowhere to be found. The rest of the way home I kept glancing over my shoulder, always expecting to see his stupid smile, but he was never there. I lived in that city for 6 months after that night, and I never went out for another walk. There was something about his face that always haunted me. He didn't look drunk, he didn't look high, he looked completely and utterly insane, and that's a very, very scary thing to see. So that's the story where the smiling man originates. If you would like to see the example photo. I'll put it here. Horrible. Horrible. And now we've got a classic, Slender Man. I used to be terrified of the Slender Man. I can't lie. I used to think he was real. I didn't really know what all these stories were about, but thank God he's not. Okay, so this story starts with a girl waking up with a jolt. The girl laid in bed for a few seconds longer, reaching over to switch on her bedside lamp. She tried to remember what exactly had stolen her sweet slumber away. When she couldn't, the brunette swung her legs over the side of the bed and heaved herself up. Checking the time on her phone, she snorted when she saw it was midnight, the witching hour. Knowing that sleep would only evade her, she left her bedroom for the kitchen, a good cup of coffee in her mind. As she passed by her front door, a chill spread like liquid fire down her spine. It's only winter, she told herself, focusing again on the coffee plan, measuring out scoops, water, preparing her cup to keep her occupied. But as the dark liquid boiled, she had nothing left to keep her mind from wandering off. The chill returned when she couldn't keep a glance. Sorry, this is like a weird format. It's really hard for me to read, I can't lie. The chill returned when she couldn't help but glance behind her to her front door. It stood there, innocently enough, just as always. The deadbolt was still in the same place and she could see nothing amiss with it. Turning back to her coffee, she did her best to forget about the feeling. With a cup in hand, she started down back towards her bedroom. As she walked by the front door, she decided that a quick glance out the peephole would help her calm her restless mind. The chill worsened with each step as she took towards the door and further away from the safety of her warm blankets. She pressed her empty hand against the cold metal door and took a deep breath before leading her eye to the peephole. At first, she could only see inky blackness and somehow seemed to swirl in itself. When she blinked in surprise, the void melted away. She wished it hadn't. In its place, there stood what she could only guess was once a man. The limbs were long and inhumanly awkward, with bulky joints branching off into several arms, not unlike branches of a tree. The creature was draped in a black suit, somehow making the thing more nightmarish to her. The icing on the cake, however, was what passed through the hellish thing's face. It was as though her mind blurred the ghastly visage to spare herself from the shock and horror. She shoved herself away from the door with her hand still pressed to it. The scalding coffee mug fell, liquid burning her bare legs as she fell backwards and somehow tried to crawl away from the door. She knew somehow that her mind hadn't been playing tricks on her. As she walked away from the door, she watched as the trendles, as the void, as she saw a snake. That sentence made no sense to me. The girl was trapped between the instinct to flee and the gut feeling to not turn her back to the door. When the door jolted, the urge to flee overcame her and she slipped in the burning liquid as she tried to make it back to her room. She knew deep down that she was trapping herself in a corner, but she had to get away from the door. The girl was halfway down the hallway when she heard the previously locked door creep open. She screamed and slipped into a wall, cracking her chin on it and stunning her. After that, there was only blackness. Nicole? A warm male voice snapped the woman out of her trance. She turned around. She was met by one of her sister's doctors. She nodded, not sure if she should say anything, or even if she could find her voice if she did have something to say. That morning, she had gotten an urgent phone call from the hospital saying that her sister Lindsay was there. Before they had even let her see her, the doctors had pulled her off to the side and insisted that they talk about what might have happened. Phrases like self-inflicted and assault had been thrown around, and Nicole felt her mind reel. She hadn't fully understood what they had been saying until Lindsay saw with her own eyes. Her little sister had a bandage wrapped around her head, covering both ears as well as her eyes. They said it was to keep her now deadened eyes from drying out, and to try to keep infection out of the wounds Lindsay had made to her ears. Doctors had guessed that either she or someone else had jammed a pencil into them to keep her off balance or to deafen herself against something. There was a mix of first and second degree burns on her hands, legs and feet from what was assumed to be the coffee her neighbours found slipped all over the entry to her apartment. As Nicole walked into her sister's hospital room for the first time, she thought she'd spied a silhouette of a man in the window. That, she knew, was impossible. Her sister's room was the third-floor story of the hospital. So, that's the original story of Slender Man, the creepypasta. And obviously we know there's a movie based off of it, and the true crime case of those girls who tried to unalive their best friend in the woods because they thought Slender Man was telling them to, and some very crazy stories that came out of Slender Man. And the final one that we're going to look at today, which photo is like ingrained into my brain and will keep me up at night is Jeff the killer. If you've never seen this photo, you're going to see it today. It's quite traumatizing. I hate it. I actually don't know the story. I know a little bit about it, but I am actually kind of nervous to read this story because it might keep me up tonight. After weeks of unexplained murders, the ominous unknown killer is still on the rise. After little evidence has been found, a young boy states that he survived one of the killer's attacks and bravely tells his story. "I had a bad dream and I woke up in the middle of the night," says the boy. "I saw that for some reason the window was open." Oh, this one's gonna get under my skin. This one's gonna keep me up, okay. "Even though I remember it being closed before I went to bed, I got up and shut it once more. Afterwards, I simply crawled under my covers and tried to get back to sleep. That was when I had a strange feeling, like someone was watching me. I looked up and nearly jumped out of my bed. There, in the ray of light illuminating between my curtains, was a pair of 2 eyes. These weren't regular eyes. They were dark, ominous eyes. They were bordered in black and just plain out terrified me. That's when I saw his mouth. A long, horrendous smile that made every hair on my body stand up. The figure stood there, watching me. Finally, after what seemed like forever, a simple phrase, but said it in only a way a madman would speak. He said, 'Go to sleep.' I let out a scream. That's what sent him at me. He pulled up a knife, aiming at my heart. He jumped on top of my bed. I fought him back. I kicked, I punched, I rolled around trying to knock him off me. That's when my dad busted in. The man threw the knife. It went into my dad's shoulder, and the man probably would have finished him off if one of my neighbours hadn't alerted the police. They drove into the parking lot and towards the door. The man turned and ran down the hallway. I heard a smash, like glass breaking. As I came out of my room, I saw the window that was pointing towards the back of the house was broken. I looked out to see him vanish into the distance. I can tell you one thing, I will never forget that face. Those cold, evil eyes and that psychotic smile. They will never leave my head. There is a lot more to this story. My throat is getting dry, though I cannot read this any longer. But here is the photo. Yeah, imagine seeing that behind your curtains in the middle of the night. No, thank you. No, thank you. Anyway, that is all I have for today. I really enjoyed this, just reading, just talking. Definitely do more creepypasta stories in the future. Also, I'm British, so I don't know whether to pronounce it as creepypasta or pasta. I don't know. Anyway, I hope you guys enjoyed. I will be back again very soon to talk about absolutely nothing.